Welcome to the Growth Cap podcast, where we chat with CEOs, investors, and other key industry leaders to uncover insights and strategies for accelerating growth and succeeding in business. I'm your host, RJ Lumba, managing partner of Growth Cap. In this episode, we chat with Leo Rinaldi, a good friend and former head of consumer strategy for JP Chase. He recently wrote Leading Innovation, a book about how the best CEOs today are those that make innovation the central component to company culture. I've known Leo for a long time, and he never ceases to impress. A West Point grad, Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and former McKinsey consultant, Leo is a sought-after executive with an incisive intellect who quickly hones in on the one or two key things in a business that make all the difference. We caught up recently to chat about his book. We hope you enjoy the show. So Leo, really appreciate you joining us. Maybe what we could do to kick off is just share a little bit about your background. Obviously, we've known each other for quite some time. Really impressed with what you've done over the years, and now you've written this book, Leading Innovation, which is very insightful. I read numerous books each year in the whole business and strategy space, and this one was one that clearly stood out, and it was a very easy read, but the takeaways are something that I continue to think about as I go about kind of the business of investing in companies. So let's do this. You give us some of your background because it helps set the stage for some of the insights you provide.
Okay, thanks a lot, RJ, and appreciate the compliment. So I know we'll talk more about the book in a second. And I've also been very impressed watching you over the years as well, as you know, going all the way back to when we met at, I think it was the Cornell MBA program, and too many years ago now. But just a little bit on my background. I went to West Point way back in 1997. So I've been interested in leadership topics for, 20 plus years. I basically went to West Point with the idea that I wanted to learn about leadership, graduated and became a Black Hawk helicopter pilot and was eventually a captain in the Army and had a lot of leadership positions during my time there. And then I got an MBA. That's when we met, of course. And after that, I got into business strategy and working primarily with financial institutions. So I joined McKinsey in their financial institutions group, stayed there for 4 or 5 years, became a manager, and then went on into industry, first at Wells Fargo for a year in wealth management strategy, and then spent several years at JP Chase. At Chase, I had a few different leadership roles. I was the head of consumer banking strategy. I was the head of distribution strategy and also the CFO of the branch network. And then after that, I left Chase, and I'm now a partner at a firm that focuses on consulting for financial institutions called Novanis, and I lead their retail banking practice.
Fantastic. One of the things that I think really caught my attention in the book is that you draw from examples, from the organizations that you worked at, and I'm trying to think about how to fit this into your framework. But you give a really great example of Jamie Dimon, and it was, I'm not sure if you put it in the framework of how he responded and how quickly he responded. But maybe maybe we could start there in terms of the examples in the books. I thought that was really helpful.
Yeah, and that will actually tie into the thesis of the book as well, which I'll sort of try to articulate as I go through the Jamie Dimon example. And obviously, I had firsthand experience under Jamie's leadership. I was a couple levels down in the organization, but sort of got to watch him operate, got to watch him speak, and the culture he created sort of permeated Chase. And the example I cite is basically that, after the crisis, of all the big bank CEOs, he's the only one that has survived. So, Wells Fargo, one of the other largest banks in the U.S., has lost their CEO, and also Bank of America lost their CEO. And Jamie himself had a major crisis. It was called the London whale crisis. When basically what occurred was there was a multi-billion-dollar trading loss that was really happened because of a risk management failure. So the bank wasn't managing risk well in this particular area, and the basically someone was gambling with the bank's money when it should have been. It was a trade that was supposed to reduce the risk of the bank, and ended up being sort of a gamble that was doubled and tripled and quadrupled down on, and the bank lost many billions. Jamie could have easily lost his job. He was dragged in front of Congress. There was an enormous bad press. But I think the difference between how he operated and some of these other CEOs operated was he reacted and adapted very quickly and very aggressively. And, I give some details in the book about how we changed how we operated, how he curtailed some of the executive compensation below him for those who were responsible, how he fired some people. And we basically changed the whole culture of the bank by the time it was all said and done. And he also was willing to say in front of very public audiences, including the U.S. Congress, hey, we screwed up. It was a huge mistake, and we're going to fix it. So I think, and then just finally, how that ties into the broader theme of the book is that, leading innovation, the thesis of the whole book is that change is accelerating. There's no doubt about it. And leaders have to become much more flexible, much more adaptable, and drive change and be at the forefront of change as opposed to holding back and resisting change in order to succeed in the new environment.
Mm-hmm. And what struck me was it's like in almost all cases, and I think other leaders will point to this, is integrity is paramount. And I think it's Buffett who says that the three things he looks for in people are intellect, energy, and integrity, with integrity being the most important. And so it was I think it was particularly insightful to see that was part of your framework, even though this is about mostly about innovation.
Right, and and a lot of people don't think about the role of integrity in innovation, right? You don't really think those two concepts are related. And the way they're related is what is integrity really? It's a dedication to the truth. And it's saying, look, if we screwed up, we're going to admit it. If certain facts are surfacing that are counter to what we expect, if we're not getting the results we expect, we're going to change it. If something's not working in the way we're treating our employees or our customers, we're gonna change that. And so integrity is very deeply related to adaptability, because basically a lot of times you see a lack of integrity when someone is trying to hold on to a decision they've made in the past that was a poor decision, and now they're trying to cover up for it. They're trying to sweep it under the rug instead of surfacing it. Saying, look, this is a reality that I don't like, but it is a reality. Now, how are we going to change and adapt to that, right? So actually, they're very intricately related, integrity and innovation.
Great. And one of the other things that I distinctly remember and I actually think about, fairly regularly, is when you described how, I guess you were trained at McKinsey on how to frame an argument, and that you'd ask certain questions, you'd set up kind of the messaging to maybe the executive at the client, and you'd ask certain questions first because it puts people in a frame of mind, maybe reminding them of why you were revisiting a certain topic in the first place. So if you could, it would be helpful to hear a little bit more about that and how you communicate with people.
Yeah, for sure. And, part of what I lay out in the book is that envisioning a new strategy or a new idea or a new concept to, improve your business or put a new product in the market is not by itself enough. You need to be able to influence others to change along with you, whether it's getting employees to join you or getting investors to invest in your concept or getting customers to sign up for something new. And within that framework, there's sort of a recurring way that there's certain recurring elements of telling the story about change, right? And those recurring elements at their simplest are situation, complication, and resolution. And so the idea is situation grounds people in where are we today and why. And part of what I lay out there is when you set up the situation, you're basically explaining to people how we got to where we are today. And if you do it properly, it reduces defensiveness. In other words, you don't want to come at people saying, hey, we have to change things because what we're doing today is really stupid. And gosh, the people who put us in these shoes today are really dumb. Like that tends to generate a lot of resistance. So instead, what you want to say is, look, it's perfectly logical how we got to where we are today, right? And this is the way the environment used to be. But complication, things have changed, right? There's a new competitive situation. There's new technology out there. Customers are demanding something new. So what we used to do isn't good enough anymore. And then resolution. So here's what we have to do now. And you can bring a lot of facts to bear in all three of those areas: situation, complication, resolution. But by framing it up as a story, it makes it very easy for people to digest, right? Because people love stories. We're sort of naturally geared for stories. People have been telling stories around the campfire for thousands of years since we were cavemen. Our brains are wired for it. So is that part of what you were bringing up, or was there another area as well you were thinking about in the book?
Yeah, no, that was perfect. I mean, like the folks that are in our audience are executives of private companies as well as investors, and I think that in almost any business situation where you're trying to make a point, the way you communicate is extremely important. So. And so that's why I recall, how you frame things, and I actually think I do think about it quite often. And so now we've covered kind of communication skills as well as the importance of integrity, which I think it always helps to hear about those, to be reminded of the importance of that integrity. And then maybe, we can go straight into some of the examples you give, and they're great examples of Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. Maybe if you were to kind of highlight kind of the two or three things that you think they have in common, and and why those were examples that you chose. That'd be great to start there.
Okay, super. So as I mentioned earlier, part of the thesis is that life is accelerating, business is accelerating, and a key driver of that is digitization, right? We're all living it every day. Nobody needs to be reminded of how much the digital technology is changing our world. And part of what's interesting about digital technology versus, let's say, if you go back in time to some of the other big innovations like the steam engine or vaccines or any of the, television, any of these things that hugely changed the world 50 or 100 years ago. The interesting thing about digital technology is it affects every single industry. And every aspect of life. And Mark Andreessen famously said, software is eating the world. And I think we're all experiencing that. So now we're living at the pace of Moore's Law, right? Digital technology is doubling, or digital speed is technology is doubling every 18 months. So that's the pace we're working at. So the reason I chose those three guys is because they are at the forefront of showing what successful leadership looks like in the digital age, right? Each one of them has sort of created from scratch enormous value that cuts across multiple industries. And we all know the story of Steve Jobs and how he affected both computers and music and movies with Pixar. And, we see it now with Amazon affecting many industries, including cloud computing and retail and so on. And we see it with Elon Musk. And so that's why I chose them. And basically in the book, I said, well, what's the common trait among all of them? And first and foremost, it is that innovation wasn't one of 10 leadership skills they had. It was the organizing principle. So basically everything they did as leaders was to drive innovation forward. And so that's what you have to do when you're operating at the pace of the digital world is basically innovation has to be the entire organizing principle of your leadership. And so what I did was I built a whole leadership model around what are those patterns that come out when you organize your leadership philosophy around innovation. And we could talk more about that, but let me pause there and see if you have any thoughts or questions.
Yeah, no, the founding, I think that's different in and of itself is you kind of start with the founding principle of innovating because it's probably the case these days with how fast things move that complacency kills, and if you're not on a daily basis thinking about how to get better, and maybe it's cannibalizing your own existing products with new ones, but maybe from there, where does what should an executive think about next? If how do they implement and maintain kind of a culture of innovation?
That's right. Yeah. So what I talk about is there's a process to innovation, right? And it's like anything fundamental and basic in life, it's very intuitive once you lay it out and you understand it. But there's details to it, and there's ways you can get better at it and really master it, right? So the basic process is super simple, right? First, you envision, what's a better way of doing things. So there's a process of envisioning something new. The second process, as we kind of alluded to earlier, is how do I inspire others to get behind this vision, right? How do I influence other people to join me? And there's a great book by Walter Isaacson called The Innovators, which basically argues that this whole idea of the lone wolf innovator is a falsehood. So a lot of times we elevate people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs, and you almost get this feeling that they did it themselves when nothing could be further from the truth, right? They have to, on a daily basis, inspire others. Steve Jobs didn't even know how to program a computer, right? He was totally dependent on others to make his vision happen. And then the final thing is, okay, you've got a vision, you've inspired others, but you've got to make it happen in the real world. Talk is cheap, right? So ultimately, you have to execute. This is a little bit where my experience in the Army helped a little bit. I always felt like McKinsey, my experience there was it's a great place at envisioning a new strategy. They didn't do much around execution. When I was in the Army, unless you're like the head of the chief of staff of the Army, you're not doing a whole lot of strategic thinking. You're doing a lot of executing. So I learned a lot in my experience in the Army about how do you execute. So that's the basic process. And then within that, I talk about, different roles that you have to play. And we could go more into detail on that as well. But the one other thing I would say about this process of envision, inspire others, and then create it and make it happen is you don't go around that loop one time. You have to keep going around the loop multiple times. And that's one of the fundamental things you see about the great innovation leaders is they go around the loop again and again and again. And a simple example is Jeff Bezos with starting with selling books on the internet. Did he stop there? No. He actually disrupted the book selling industry and the book industry itself by then inventing the Kindle and sort of really pioneering digital books. So he went around that loop again and again. He didn't sort of stop with one loop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, those were, I think, great examples. Obviously, we hear about them every day in the media, but but when you really stop and think about, what they did to create enduring value for their companies, really all comes back to it was almost as though they were challenging, themselves and their ideas on a daily basis. And when you hear, Bezos in interviews, it's fascinating to hear about how he's thinking already 5 years out, because the kind of strategies he put in place are well underway and can take 3 to 5 years. So he's constantly thinking about the future and the long term. So. I think we covered a good amount, and I'll leave it to kind of the listeners, our audience, to go out and check out the book. What's the best way for them to find it?
Yeah, the best way right now is just to go on Amazon, and if you search for Leading Innovation, you'll find the book. And there's obviously both a digital and a physical copy you can buy, whatever you choose. Mm-hmm. So that's the easiest way to do it.
Okay, excellent. Well, one thing I wanted to thank you for, which I don't think I've ever done in the past, but thank you for your service to the country. And I know it was a long time ago, but as I was my daughter this morning, as we were kind of donating some things to veterans, she asked me who veterans are and why we donate. And I just thought to myself, it's a good reminder. There's people who serve the country, and sometimes they're you forget it. You forget to thank them for all they do, and there's many out there that can't necessarily land a good job, and obviously that's not the case with you, but I remember that obviously you served the country, so appreciate you all that you did.
Oh, well, thanks so much. And one thought I had as you were saying that is, now that I've been on both sides of the fence, and it's been a while since I was in the military, so both the private sector and the military, I think on the one hand, there's something we all have in common. I think everyone who gets up and goes to work in the morning, you're serving somebody. You're either you're serving a customer directly, or you're serving your fellow employees at a company. So to some degree, we all do service in our daily lives. We're all helping each other. And then I do think there is a special, really service-focused ethos that the military has, and it was something special that I experienced while I was there. And a particularly interesting thing is, and a lot of people don't think about this very much, is when I was in the military, I thought very little about money, which is ironic because you're getting paid a lot less than you are today. But it's sort of like you're all in the same boat, you're all living in the same barracks, you're all on the same base, and you certainly don't do it for the money. And even the generals really not getting paid that much relative to a private sector CEO. So you're doing it for other reasons. I now that I'm long past my time in the military, I certainly appreciate those folks who are still in as well. But thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for your time. And as always, great chatting with you, Leo.
All right. Same here, RJ. Thanks again.